On behalf of the Pacific Justice Institute, thank you for your time. I'm Brad Dacus, president and founder of the Pacific Justice Institute. We at Pacific Justice Institute are committed to serving you, your family, your churches, defending religious freedom, parental rights, and the sanctity of human life. Real quickly, for those of you who may not be familiar with this, I'm going to give you just a real super brief summary. We have offices all across the United States now, in New York City, Denver, Seattle, Reno, Oregon, California, and we now have one actually in Mississippi as well. So we're here to serve you. We have hundreds of affiliate attorneys all across the country. We do our work all without charge. We don't just pick out the high-profile cases, the big game cases. We work hard to make sure that everyone out there gets help. No church is too small, no matter too insignificant if it deals with religious freedom, parental rights, or the sanctity of human life. So I want you to know that right up front. We're not just talking about the way things should be or how things are in terms of law. We're letting you know that we're here to help you and without charge. So contact us and just go to our website, pji.org, pji.org, request for help, and also we'll also work hard to give you updates with our legal insider every week. Keep us in your prayers. We have over 50 cases now in active litigation defending faith, family, and freedom, and we help thousands every year with regards to these matters, all without charge. So don't hesitate to contact us. We're here to make sure that no one is left on the side of the road. It's a very unique facet of Pacific Justice. So with that said, I would like now our pastor liaison, Peter Mord, to open us up in prayer. Peter?
All right, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us to get on this call, and thank you for Brad and his leadership. Thank you for Pacific Justice helping us in this needy time. I pray that you'd please be with every pastor and every representative on this call, Lord, that we would have wisdom as we go through these days. Lord, would we seek your heart on the matter, and would you please give us wisdom from these attorneys as well? And we'll thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Peter. Peter is a pastor of a church in Southern California. He also serves full-time as pastor liaison for Pacific Justice Institute. First, Peter, I just want to ask you, we've seen a lot of churches open up, particularly in blue states on May 31st. Real quick, have you seen any reports, any pastors contact you, letting you know of any kind of pushback, any threats by police, any raids by police at all among the churches that you're connected with and are connected with you?
No, Brad, we have not seen any, at least in our area, or those pastors we've been in contact. There's been no citations or anything that we are aware of. Certainly, if there are pastors out there that are being cited, we definitely want to hear about that. But praise the Lord, as of right now, I'm not aware of any.
Yeah. It was interesting how just a few days before May 31st, how we had the protests and the riots. I think that was definitely taking the air out of the football, so to speak, for those who were wanting to go after the churches. It was the timing for such activity couldn't have been better in terms of the churches reopening. Of course, what happened was horrific. Another question, Peter. You're heading up the Church Finds Its Voice program from the Pacific Justice Institute. Give a brief update on that and how that can serve and help pastors moving forward who want to have an impact on this election. This last time around, we've seen the results of what happened when people are occupying local government positions and they're faith-friendly or not faith-friendly. We've seen them at the governor level, state legislative level, and how churches have been treated in some states versus other states as a direct result of those who are elected to office, which is a direct result to some degree of the church not finding its voice and expressing that voice at the ballot box. What are you doing and what are we doing moving forward to serve churches in this regard?
Well, the first thing we're doing is encouraging participation. I was talking to a pastor just a few moments before this call, and he had mentioned that long before the pandemic of COVID-19, there was a pandemic of apathy. And we're trying to call churches out of apathy to say, you have to participate. You have a God-given responsibility to participate in encouraging people to vote and in educating people to vote. And those who God gives me influence with, I definitely want to help them to know what the principles are, and also to know that they can participate through ballot gathering. I'm helping our church register to vote. We're doing everything we can to be a part of our local, state, city, and county elections and federal elections. I think we have to be a voice, and we have to make our voice heard. If the last 3 months haven't taught us that, I don't know what will.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well said, well said. If the last 3 months haven't taught us what happens when the church is not responsible and has its voice heard, then I don't know what would. It's churches can no longer think that they can just do their own thing and just tune out society and not expect it to have an impact. It's had a huge impact. That apathy has had a huge impact. Among the resources we have a video for pastors on our website, Peter, as well as information so that they can easily, also Church and Politics booklet, easily have voter registration, have all their members register to vote, very smoothly put together a ballot gathering where members of the church on ballot gathering Sunday bring in their absentee ballots, and they're all brought together so that way pastors can be sure that all their members are registered, all their members are voting or have voted, and then have those delivered. It's going to be very impacting. It's a strong statement of our testimony as believers. And as I say, a church that's filled with the love of Jesus is a church that cares about people outside their church walls, including our pastors. And if a church cares about people outside the church walls, they're going to vote. Voting is a manifestation of the love of Christ and the fact that we care. We care for the unborn, we care for the needy, we care for the where we see injustice. So I appreciate what you're doing. And folks, if you have questions, if you're a pastor and you're like, gosh, I don't know what to do practically speaking, I don't want to talk to an attorney per se on this issue, it's more practical. Feel free to give us a call, and Peter is here, Pastor Peter Mord, to work with you and talk to you about what he's doing in his situation moving forward. He's having outdoor services right now. Some of you may have issues or questions about how to do that. Feel free to talk to Peter. He was be able to have indoor services, but where he was meeting has been shut down. He was meeting in schools. So I know a good number of you are having indoor services. And we're going to talk today about specifically something that's come up dealing with mask and mask requirements and the impact it's had. I have a lot of calls from pastors coming into me personally. What do we do? We've got these new mandates by governors. How do we operate practically speaking? We've got some very good news for you on this. Our attorneys have done a great job scrutinizing those mask mandates, if you will. But first, I want to talk to Kevin Snyder. Kevin is our chief counsel. He's the one who coordinates all the litigation for Pacific Justice Institute with all our staff attorneys, our volunteer affiliate attorneys across the country. And I want him to give us first a brief update on a very important decision coming from the Supreme Court dealing with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and its redefinition by the majority of the court, 6-3 decision, very disappointing. A majority of the court redefining the term sex to include sexual orientation as well as gender identity and its impact on potentially on churches and ministries moving forward. Kevin, take it away.
Good to be with you, and thanks everyone for joining us. I'd like to talk about 3 cases that were combined in the Supreme Court. They go under the heading of Bostock versus Clayton, and in these they involve two gentlemen who were homosexuals, a skydiver, a man who works for a county social services, and also a transgender man, a man who was born male and obviously continues to be a male until he's recently deceased. But in any event, he worked for a funeral home and he wanted to present as a woman. All 3 of these people were fired and they brought a lawsuit. And so the case wound its way up through the court system and ended up in our Supreme Court. And the law on this is something called Title VII. And this is let me briefly read you what it says. It shall be unlawful for employment practice for an employer to fail or refuse to hire or to discharge any individual, or otherwise to discriminate against any individual with respect to his compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of such individuals' race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. So at issue was, what is the term sex? What does that word mean? You can't discriminate based on sex. At the time that the law was written in 1964, it meant what it means, frankly, today, and that is biological state of being a male or female. But did Congress think that sex included homosexuality or transgenderism? Well, in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court essentially rewrote the law and redefined the term. And in that, they decided that sex can include homosexuality and transgenderism. So this has a great impact, obviously, on secular employers. However, under Title VII, Section 702 states that this title shall not apply to a religious corporation or educational institution with respect to employment of individuals of a particular religion and to perform work connected with that. And then it declines to discriminate on the basis of religion in all employment decisions. So at present, religious entities, religious institutions, churches still have protections under Title VII. However, the final chapter has not been written. In a week, possibly 2 weeks, the Supreme Court will be handing down two very important decisions. These involve discrimination with a religious school, a parochial school, under the cases of Lady of Guadalupe. And in that, two teachers were two teachers were let go, not based on religion, but based on handicap. But we believe that will have, whatever way the court goes, it will have profound implications on the church. So stay tuned in the next week or two as to how things develop.
Okay. I appreciate that, Kevin. One little point of clarity I want people to understand. As far as that exception, that religious exception, many people may think to themselves, well, we're not a church, we're a parachurch ministry. Would a parachurch ministry be protected right now under the exception of Title VII?
Under Section 702, yes, they would. It's religious institution or association, and they have drafted the language broadly. Now, on our website, there is a section back in 2000. I should back up back into around 2006 or 7. I saw this coming, and so I started studying what was happening in Canada and produced some documents. If you go to our website, pji.org, we have some language for bylaws. We have a facilities use policy, and it has a sample contract. You need to get those and start looking at those carefully, and then look at your own bylaws and your own policies and see if there's any changes that need to be made in those.
Right, and those are available without charge on our website. And if you have questions, you can follow those up with us. We'd be happy to help you. But for churches, parachurch organizations, private Christian schools, I highly recommend you to take advantage of those moving forward, especially in view of this recent Supreme Court decision. Also, how the term sex could be applied in other instances and other languages, also a possibility under Title IX or Title X. We could see this being applied to defending a male wrestler under the assertion of their gender identity to be able to wrestle women and win the scholarships and the prizes and things. That's a real problem. This could actually be impacting in that regard as well moving forward in terms of schools and admittance and things like that. So we'll be watching that very closely. Kevin, thank you very much for the great work that you're doing moving forward. Oh, also real quickly, we have an update on the Harvest case. This is the church in Salinas. I know this has hit the news wires. We are trying to get an injunction so that they could be able to move into the building across the street in downtown Salinas so they could have a church service like they've had before, but have a larger space. I understand Salinas said, no, we filed a lawsuit. What happened?
Unfortunately, the lower court ruled against us. This was a situation in which there was a downtown area zoned. They wanted to make it conducive to pedestrian traffic. They wanted a lively atmosphere. They wanted what they called a fun environment. And so they, right in that same area, 3-block area, there were 2 cinemas, a civic type event center, and a children's theater. And unfortunately, the court did not rule for us, so we've taken it up on appeal. Ironically, since the court made the decision a month and a half ago, they've had the protests, and now the city is finding all kinds of protests in the downtown area, and that doesn't seem like the type of fun they had anticipated.
Right. I understand there's some other buildings like the post office and other entities that are not fun businesses, so they seem like they're very selective in their application of their criteria. Needless to say, it violates the Arlupa statute, and I'm really glad with the work that we're doing to go to bat for that church and churches like that. We do a lot of that kind of work. So if you're out there, have those kind of issues with your church or synagogue, contact Pacific Justice Institute. We'd love to go to bat for you. We've seen some real success in this area in the past. Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate that. Now I'd like to bring on our attorney, one of our senior staff attorneys, Matt McReynolds. He's out of our Sacramento office. Matt, I'd like you to comment on churches preparing for the second wave, and in particular, the mask requirements. This is a big issue for many people on this Zoom call. There's been this requirement that everyone seemingly has to wear a mask. They have to, if they're in public places, or it seems very, very restrictive for many people. Obviously, we understand why it's being required, and we're not going there. I'm not a medical expert, but from a religious freedom perspective, this is a real concern for a lot of churches. Does a pastor have to wear a mask when he preaches? Does the worship team have to wear a mask? Is a church required to make sure all their members are wearing masks in order to occupy the church facility to worship on a Sunday morning? What say you, Matt?
Yeah, well, thanks, Brad, for bringing me on. Can everybody see and hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, the mask requirement has caused a lot of angst across California and across the other states that have started to implement it. So we've taken a very close look at what the requirement actually is. Here in California, I'll start there, and then I'll let our other attorneys from other states chime in on the requirements in their states. But one of the most important aspects, Brad, of the mask requirement as it relates to churches especially, is that this is styled in the nature of an individual mandate, an individual responsibility. Now, this could change. We've seen a lot of things change on a near daily basis, so it would not surprise me if in the coming weeks we see the church guidance from the state updated to place more of a burden on churches or attempt to for enforcement. But where things stand right now is that churches do not have that burden of enforcement. What they have under the state requirements are an obligation to inform, to post signage for those who are coming to services, but the requirement is actually placed on the individuals. And I should note, this is separately, there is a requirement for staff members of the church interacting with the public with some important exceptions.
Okay. All right. So when it comes to churches and their members come in, it's obviously good for a church to make it very clear to the members, say, the mandate by state law is that you need to wear a mask. This is up to you. This is for you to take to heart and make your own determination whether or not you fall into the exemptions of having a medical condition that would warrant that. That's up to you. But I am making it very clear to understand that there is a mandate, and then just move on. So they don't have to enforce it, but it is advisable for them to let the congregation, I guess, be aware of the mandate.
That's right. The requirement, the obligation that's placed through the church guidance, the that was updated back most recently on June the 12th. It obligates churches to have signage about masks and the importance of masks and social distancing, as well as informing them. And you alluded to the medical exceptions that are very important, Brad. Also wanted to mention an important exception, and this would be particularly important for those communicating from the platform, for communicating with those who are hard of hearing and rely on lip reading. I know this is an issue and concern in my church, where we have members and attendees who do rely on lip reading, which can just be enormously frustrating in the face of when cloth face coverings are used. And so there is an exception for those, such as a pastor or members of the worship team, communicating with members of the public, and that could include certainly those who may be tuning in to your online broadcast, a lot larger audience that some churches are now experiencing. And so to be mindful of those who rely on lip reading. One way that the leaders can navigate between those two things is through the use of clear face shields. But if you don't have access to the clear face shields, then there's an exception for you to be able to communicate with those who are hard of hearing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate that. So we have two solid exceptions. Medical exceptions, don't have to have a letter from a doctor. And you can have that, that's good support. You can actually maybe just write it out yourself if you want to have that on hand. Explaining what your medical condition is, that you want to go into a store or something, have that available. And then in addition, lip reading. So if you have anyone in your congregation that is hard of hearing and does some lip reading, then that's justification for the pastor, the worship team, not to wear a mask and not to have any mask. And then also, once again, this is an individual responsibility. It's not something the church is responsible for. It's individual responsibility for members of your church to decide if they need a mask or not. So that gives a lot of freedom, much more leeway than it seemed at first. So hopefully that's encouraging to some of you. I know some of your churches, I've talked to some pastors, they say, we don't wear masks. No one in our church wears a mask. This is a bunch of baloney. Da, 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 da. I mean, that may be where your church is at. You may have a church with a lot of senior citizens. It's a higher concern. You need to weigh it out for yourself, but we're just telling you what you can do and what the mandates are, and very valuable exceptions to those mandates. So thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate that. Emily Mimnaugh, who heads up our office near the state capital of Nevada in Reno. Emily, I want you to talk about, just give us a Nevada update on the cases there, and actually the case that you are wanting and ready to file there as we move on. And then also after that, I'll have you also give a mask update regarding the new mask mandate there in Nevada. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, we have a complaint ready to be filed here. And unfortunately, we had a couple of plaintiffs who were going to pursue that case and had to pull out for various reasons. So we are still thinking that it is a right time, and we legally are on strong footing to bring that claim. So we're looking for a church who is burdened by this 50-person cap. We still have in Nevada, as everyone listening from Nevada knows, we have a hard limit on all churches here. No service can have more than 50 people. And you look at movie theaters that have 50 people per screen. You can look at numerous examples where they're allowed to have 50% capacity. So we're currently in a much more difficult situation for churches than other states. So we definitely are wanting to challenge that law because it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, no, Emily, I wanted to focus on this a little bit because we may have some people, I'm sure we have some people from Nevada, some church leaders and pastors on this Zoom call. Some of them are probably thinking to themselves, well, I know that's the rule, but it's not being enforced against us. And so since our church doesn't look like it's going to be enforced against us, we don't really want to, rock any boats. We're getting by. But I think they need to realize it's still the law. It's still hanging over their heads. And if we don't challenge this and get this declared unconstitutional, this can come back again and again where it can be enforced. And if we let them get away with this, there's a higher risk that we're going to have this happening down the line. So to me, this is a time when the bell is tolling. And if we don't respond to it, you're going to be surrendering potentially your freedoms and liberties in the days ahead, potentially for generations. So Emily, is that your perception as well, at the importance of having just one single church willing to stand up and say, I believe that this is a violation of our constitutional rights, and I'm willing to stand up for it. We'll pick up all the costs, all the expenses. We'll do the work. We just need someone to be able to be willing to step up and say, count me in. I am willing to stand up. The bell toll is tolling. I'm willing to stand up to protect our freedoms and liberties. We're not asking you to go to a battlefront and risk your life. You're not having to sacrifice yourself dealing with a bunch of mobs or anything. Just to simply be a plaintiff to allow us to protect liberties and religious freedom for churches for many down the road. Is that an accurate assessment, Emily, of what we're dealing with there in Nevada?
That's
right.
And what we want to do is we want to bring an equal protection claim, and that has not yet gone before the courts here in Nevada. Other claims have, but not that, and that's, a difference maker.
Yeah, and it's very strong. The equal protection is actually the strongest avenue in challenging this, and it really gets to the core of why government cannot treat churches unequally. They can't say, okay, you movie theater, no problem. You can have much looser standards to open up and less distancing or less, higher percentages of your occupancy. And in churches, you have to have lower occupancy, and we're going to give you greater restrictions. That's clear unequal treatment under the law, under the violation of the Equal Protection Clause. It's a great fact pattern supporting a very strong issue of law, but we need to have a plaintiff. So if you're out there, if you think you know of someone who might be interested, a church might be interested, please contact us and talk to Emily. We're here to serve you. We want to protect the people of Nevada and other states that could be affected by moving this forward and allowing this to continue on. So, okay, Emily, let me ask you one more thing before I let you go, if I can. The mask requirements. What do those look like there in Nevada for the churches dealing with that situation?
Right. We got a new directive from the governor last night that goes into effect tomorrow, which those of us who are watching the way things were going in other states were not surprised. But here we now have a requirement that individuals going out in any public space, privately owned, open to the public by admission or free, anyone out in the public space is required to wear a mask. It doesn't need to be an N95 or a surgical mask, but a type of face and mouth and nose covering. And the exceptions, similar to what Matt said, in California, here in Nevada, you have one for age 2 to 9 years old, don't need to wear a mask. Those with a disability, either breathing or unable to take it off with ease. And the third exception, which I think is quite interesting, is for individuals who are receiving a service involving their face or nose. And that may have implications for those who are attending mass or church or mass in a manner similar to the exception that Matt was talking about, where if you're receiving a service and you need to be able to see the face, either of the choir or the preacher, I think there's a good, strong argument there that would require the temporary removal of the mask where you don't have a plastic partition.
So once again, those three exceptions are, I want to make sure people understand this. Go ahead.
For the age, if you're under 9 years old, they're not required. If you have a medical disability, either breathing or otherwise. And I should say here in Nevada, you are absolutely not required to carry a medical note or any documentation about that. That is in the statute. And the third is if you are receiving or obtaining a service involving the nose or mouth, you may temporarily remove the mask.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure those exceptions were very clear to people. And even in California, a letter documentation is not required. I just say I recommend it if you're having to go into stores and places. It helps to clarify to the management there that this is something you're just making up. You're not being obstinate and saying, I have a medical condition. It's just from a practical perspective that it's not a legal mandate. Business owners can deny who they wish to do business with. That's why I think it's a good idea to have something in writing for that purpose, but it's not legally mandated, just like it's not legally mandated in Nevada as well. So
I should add, Brad, here, one significant difference in Nevada is the onus is absolutely and directly placed on business owners and proprietors of any establishment that's open to the public. The onus is absolutely on them to enforce it, and it is in the directive. And it's, I think, embodied by the slogan, no shoes, no shirt, no mask, no service. They really want premise owners and businesses to be the ones taking on the responsibility of enforcing this.
Okay, very good, very good. Thank you very much, Emily. I appreciate the work you're doing there in Nevada for so many people and so many churches. Jorge Ramos heads up, as our attorney, heads up our Washington State office there in the Seattle area. Jorge, give us an update on what's going on in Washington, please.
Good afternoon, Brad. So here in Washington State, we did file a lawsuit about 4 weeks ago. We had two pastors, Pastor Jack Arnold and Pastor Steve Winery, I hope I pronounced that right, step forward. We filed the lawsuit, served the Attorney General, received a notice of appearance, and they moved it to federal court. And at the same time, we were having discussions with Governor Inslee's representative. And what we were asking for, similar to Nevada, is equal treatment with the cinemas. And about 2 weeks after, which I think our lawsuit definitely had an effect, they emailed me personally, FYI, here are the new guidelines, and they had given us 50% capacity up to 400 in phase 3. That's what our lawsuit was demanding. So after discussions with the pastors and them feeling comfortable, we dismissed our case, seeing that we had received what we asked for. So that was a win for us and a win for all the pastors of Washington. And the guidelines, if any pastor on here does not have them yet, I have them and they can email me personally. The important things are, of course, phase 1 still has the opportunity for 100 people outside, but they included a modified phase 1 and phase 2, which allows pastors to hold up to 25% capacity or up to 200 in this new phase. And also it has specific language where it talks about multiple rooms and how each room includes 25%. It's pretty specific, so I would advise people to look at this. It has restroom requirements and hallways and things like that have to be they're pretty specific to qualify for that. The phase 3, like I said, is the big one. Hold indoor services up to 50% capacity or up to 400, whichever is less. And this, of course, you have to follow social distancing, but that's a big improvement. And involving masks, I'm getting tons of questions from everyone. And I would say I've had a pastor send me a Twitter link from Whatcom County Sheriff, and a lot of sheriff's officers are saying the same thing, that there's no real way for them to enforce this. There's no RCW, there's no clear guidance, but they're just asking people to be responsible and care for their fellow citizens. And that's pretty much all I can update on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. I appreciate that, Jorge. What you provided was a reminder, a very important reminder, is that this varies county by county, not just in Washington State, but also in Oregon, California, and other places as well. So if you're listening and you're thinking, I don't know if that's true with my county, there's a good chance that may be true. It may not be the same with your county versus another county or another situation. So don't hesitate to contact us at Pacific Justice Institute. We have full-time attorneys that are there on staff that are going to bat for you. We have part-time attorneys, we have affiliate attorneys across the country, we have offices across the country. We're here to serve you, so don't hesitate to contact us. Also, I want to just mention also that I mentioned this before. Yes, there are churches that support our work, and individuals, of course. We greatly appreciate that. I think we have over 140 or more than that support us on a regular basis. That's never a requirement, and it's not even taken into consideration if you need help. You support what God's calling you to support. We're going to serve those who God's calling us to serve, which is people needing help. Whether you support us or are part of our team or not, that doesn't matter. So never hesitate to contact us, please. We want to serve you, and we work very hard to make sure that everyone gets help. So don't hesitate. Also, I want to let you know before we get into Q&A, which we have a lot of Q&As here, which I appreciate, or in a good number. Next week, we're going to be talking about private schools and across the country. What should a private school be doing to reopen? We've got a lot of serious issues. Some are thinking about requiring all their students, no matter, kindergarten or whatever, all the students to wear a mask all the time, all day. That could actually be problematic from a liability perspective. We're going to talk about that and other issues and possible alternatives for private Christian schools to adopt that will be safe as well as make good legal common sense in terms of your interests and protection as a private Christian school. So please tune in. Also, we're going to talk once again about the church homeschool co-ops and the opportunity that your churches have to, in an incredible way, to expand your congregations in a tremendous way by reaching out to kids whose parents want to homeschool, but they can't. And also, many of you may be aware of this, but in California, there's a legislation, I think it's AB 77, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's SB 77. Anyway, it's a legislation that would get rid of all charter schools. The governor is supporting it. If it passes, we're going to see a lot of families in a very tough situation who do not want to have their children in the government schools because of the radical new sex ed curriculum that's being poured out this coming fall, and not just in California, but in other states, predominantly in blue cities like Austin and Fort Worth across the country. So what do you do about that? We're going to talk about that and the opportunities that your church has to fill that void in a very positive way and a very evangelical way. So we're really encouraged about that. So private Christian schools, church homeschool co-ops, and opportunities to respond to new efforts to shut down parental choice and opportunities in education, and your opportunity to minister through these things that are happening. Oftentimes it's easy to look at these situations and say, this is just terrible, this is awful, let's go out and have some nachos and maybe pray about it. The reality is we've got great opportunities. Amidst these dark clouds are major silver linings, and we're going to talk about some of that. So we're faithful to take advantage of those in the days ahead. So that's going to be next Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. 2 p.m. Pacific time. You may be hearing this saying, well, we're not a private Christian school. Okay, fine. You may say, and we already have a homeschool program or whatever, reaching out to parents, and you may think that. Well, send this over. Forward the flyer you're going to receive to the private Christian schools in your area, so we can serve them. We do not charge, and they're going to need our assistance. I can tell you that right now. All across the country, they're going to need what we're going to offer them without charge. So please be thoughtful of others and pass these on. I really, really appreciate that. I think it's what Christ wants us to do, to look after our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ and other ministries. Now, Q&A. Let's dive into this. We have here, first question is, do churches or private religious, okay, just moved on me here, sorry about that, schools need to get releases from parents before admitting their children? Will release work with insurers of grandparents, e.g., who contract from grandkids? Okay. Let's see here. Kevin, did you get that question? So do churches or private religious schools need to get releases from parents before admitting their children? I guess, will release work with insurers of grandparents, et cetera, who contract the disease from their grandkids. What are your thoughts on that? Kevin, Matt, go ahead.
No, I don't think they need to get a release from them any more than if someone walks into a Walmart, gets sick, and then goes home. You don't sign releases there or at Costco or anywhere else to put that kind of onus on religious schools. Public schools are not doing that, so I would not. I would have some reservations about going that direction.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next question is not picking up. No, what is it? Are face masks and face shields considered equivalent? Are they considered equivalent? Any thoughts on that? Matt, Kevin? How about Matt? You want to try that
sure.
one?
I would say so. The face shields are in many ways superior. They're harder to obtain, and so the requirement of the face covering, face masks, face cloth covering, sometimes they're referred to as, is just more available to most people. But there are some advantages to having face shields, and this is why the state is saying here in California that they're going to issue face shields, see-through plastic, clear plastic, to all of the teachers in the state. So they are superior in a lot of ways, but from a legal standpoint, they're pretty equivalent.
Okay, we've got several questions here. One is, can a church legally support a petition to Governor Gavin Newsom? Sure, a church can do that. Church is a nonprofit. 501c3s are allowed limited lobbying regarding specific legislation or actions of the state or governorship. So yeah, the answer to that is yes. You just can't use a substantial portion of your total church resources, time, money, property, etc., employees, to push forth legislation. But I've yet to ever see a church get anywhere near substantial amounts of resources like that. Next question. In Washington State, we are trying to figure out how to provide child care, children's ministry. Are there any guidelines, or have any churches started any resources for us? We are in Thurston County and in phase 3. And Thurston County in phase 3. So is Jorge on there? Okay, is he? Okay, Jorge, did you get that question?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing specific to children ministries. I think you have to follow the other guidelines. It's going to be a room, right? So 25%, 50% capacity of a children's ministry. But then can you practice social distancing with children? I hear that's been the big issue for trying to start any children's ministry or schools or things like that. So. Okay,
very good. Ray Hackey.
Yes.
Very good. You're on. I know you were speaking to a group of pastors today, and so I'm glad you were able to make the call. Thank you so much. And you've done.
Apologize, I'm late.
No, that's okay. You were out speaking to a group of pastors, and I really appreciate those opportunities, folks. By the way, if you ever like to have Ray or any of our attorneys speak to your group a group of pastors or other kind of group to talk about the law and the challenges of the law, we're delighted in that. We love to give them that opportunity to let you know firsthand what's going on and what we're doing about it, answering questions. We're here to serve. We do that all without charge. So if you'd like to have one of our attorneys come out. Also, I do a lot of guest preaching myself. I love preaching the word. I'm expository, evangelical message. I'll leave it at that. So, and I don't charge either. But Ray, well, I want you to talk about what you're dealing with, the state of Oregon, and an update regarding what's happening there in Oregon. In your case that you had, that was so dramatic, you were able to get an injunction declaring null and void the governor's shutdown mandate, and then an emergency stay was granted, I understand, but went to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court, I understand, ruled and reversed that and basically said that the governor can pretty much do whatever she wants and ignore the limitations. That's sort of a rough paraphrase, but go ahead and fill in the details if you'd like. Go ahead.
Right. Basically, what I don't necessarily want to get too technical here, but basically there are 3 provisions of Oregon statutory and constitutional law that deal with emergencies. One is Chapter 401, which deals with general emergencies. One is Chapter 433, which deals specifically with public health emergencies, and COVID-19 certainly qualifies. And then there's Article 10A of the Oregon Constitution, which deals with catastrophic disasters. And basically, the way the Governor's Council presented it, they said it was three different tools that she can use depending on the circumstances. But basically, the way the Supreme Court ruled, she's going to take ORS 401 every single time, because ORS 401 basically gives her the ability to use her powers not only broadly but indefinitely until she decides to terminate the emergency. And if she's got a supermajority in the legislature, like she does now, there's no way that the legislature is going to convene and basically try to put the kibosh on her efforts to wield her powers as broadly and unilaterally and indefinitely as she has. Now, having said, I'm sorry, Brad.
Oh, I was just going to say, as far as moving forward, we're not done with Oregon, are we? Go ahead.
We are not. Basically, we did move to dismiss our case before the Baker County Circuit Court, yes. However, we are basically, we're trying to re-strategize and prepare for another charge up the hill. Basically, we're trying to, what we hope to do is strike where the iron is hot, because, you know, Portland, as many of you know, is a hot button area where a lot of protests and riots are going on right now. And, you know, if you look at Governor Brown's orders, they apply with equal force to both civic gatherings as well as faith-based gatherings. And I'm fairly certain that the protests going on in Portland qualify as civic gatherings. And Governor Brown has made clear that she's not going to enforce her orders against the protesters up there. So basically, she is arbitrarily and discriminatorily applying, you know, her orders. She's basically saying, you know, we're going to uphold the First Amendment rights of one group, but not of the other, which is, so basically right now, what I'm hoping to do is, you know, get, you know, Portland churches, or at least a couple, on board, and we're hoping to challenge, you know, her order, you know, at least is applied.
It's clear unequal treatment under the law. We see that. So if you're a church there in Oregon, please contact us and ask for Ray. We're, like I said, we're getting ready to charge back up the hill again. Ray did a fantastic job getting a judge who was actually appointed by the governor to grant our injunction, declaring it initially null, the governor's mandate null and void. That was an incredible feat. I was very pleased, and I saw God's hand of grace on that one. But we've got some definite challenges there in Oregon, and yet we've got a very strong attorney, a diligent attorney, Ray Hackey, who I've nicknamed the PGI Bulldog, and we're getting ready to go back up that hill, but we need some more churches. If you'd like to be a part of that, please contact us. We can't go back up there that hill unless we have a plaintiff, and we'd like to have at least more than one. So I appreciate that, Matt. Real quick question, Matt, then we got to move on. Excuse me, for Ray. Quick question, Ray. It says, I do not see any mention of faith-based organizations listed in the Oregon mask guidelines. Are we currently exempt?
I'm not sure that you are necessarily. I think, you know, just because you're not mentioned there doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't apply. I think it may behoove you to err on the side of caution and require it. I mean, it's kind of one of those things, better safe than sorry.
Right. It's probably, Ray, it's probably like, I understand, like in California, it's an individual requirement that individuals have to be responsible for. But it's nothing that I don't think a church would have to, like we heard from Matt and from Emily with what's going on in their states. I think, is Oregon pretty similar in that it's up to the individual. It's not up to the church to comb through the pews and make sure everyone's keeping their mask on, or an action is going to be brought against the church. It's really an individual mandate there as well, right? Is it correct about with regard to Oregon?
Well, I think.
Really, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think churches, you know, obviously, you know, when it comes to the mask order, you know, churches have a standard of care that they're supposed to comply with, and you know, if they don't comply with it, they render themselves, they take the risk of civil liability. And
right,
so,
and that's why, like, you require like the signs and to follow the safety checklist to make sure that liability is not infringed on and is not risked. And that was a good point too. That's what Emily has said as well. So, and Matt. So, folks out there, once again, use the safety checklist. I agree with what Ray said. There is a standard of care, and that safety checklist will cover you fairly well on the liability side with some of what we talk about, including the sign postings and letting them know about what they need to do to protect themselves. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It says, can you please address again, are parachurches and Christian schools protected from this new Supreme Court decision regarding protection regarding sex? So, so Kevin, so if that is the understanding that they, along with churches, are protected regarding, as a religious exemption regarding the Supreme Court decision regarding the discrimination in hiring or firing because of sexual orientation or practices or gender identity issues, people with gender identity conditions.
Brad, as we sit here today, the answer is absolutely yes. However, the Supreme Court, there is a decision coming down in a week or so that will directly deal with that. So, you know, we're good for 7 days, but again, there's a case on point coming down, and so we'll have to hold our breath until then.
Right, but thank you very much. And folks, this is another reminder of why it matters to vote. I'm not going to tell you how to vote. The Bible, I think, gives a pretty good instruction on what's important from God's perspective. But I would strongly encourage you to do that, because who we have occupying the White House and the Senate are going to determine who our future judges are, including the Supreme Court, especially over the next 4 years. We could have up to 4 replacements, potentially, on the Supreme Court. That would be a huge game changer either way, either very liberating for churches and the ability for people of faith to flourish and live their faith and have revival, or potential for tremendous persecution and assault on the ability for us to live our faith without being treated as a subclass in society and have tremendous limitations to do so, to live our faith. So just another reminder how important it is. And once again, talk to Peter Mort, our pastor liaison, if you want to be a part of these church gatherings that we're going to be having, the breakfast for pastors, to really enable you this summer to have your voice heard. Next question is, do churches in California, we're in Shasta County, have any basis for equal protection claim? For an equal protection claim, how about compared to fitness centers guidelines that don't limit the total number, but allow capacity based on physical distancing and other bases? I think that's a really good point. Once again, we're going back to unequal treatment under the law, and that is, I'll just answer that one. That's the basis of our cases that we're filing. Unequal treatment. That's a very strong position. In fact, the Supreme Court decision not that long ago, 5-4 decision by Roberts, he specifically pointed out that the case at hand was not really addressing the unequal treatment, similar situated fact pattern. But as we look at facts that are where we're dealing with similarly situated situations, particularly like movie theaters, graduation ceremonies, schools opening, and yet churches not even being given the same opportunities, that's unequal treatment. I think as far as the fitness workout center, there's a good chance the court may say, that's not like kind, it's a different thing. We're not going to second guess the health and safety of it. That's pretty much the Supreme Court said in that decision. But light gatherings, graduation ceremonies, wedding ceremonies, schools openings, school openings up, movie theaters, those are things that we're looking at in making our case for under equal protection grounds. So, but it is outrageous and it's clearly unfair, and I think it's irrational. But unfortunately, Roberts didn't see it the same way as 4 other justices on the court. So, question: for our safety checklist of symptoms to ask about, should we include the symptoms of loss of taste and loss of smell? For our safety checklist, the symptoms to ask about. Okay, trying to grab that. Emily, could you take on that?
Sure. You can certainly. That is one of the symptoms: loss of taste and loss of smell. Emphasis on new loss of taste or smell is listed in one of the types of symptoms that the CDC recognizes. That those include fever, chills, cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle body aches, headache, new loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, the gross ones at the end. And those, there's a link. There's a link to the list of symptoms from the CDC in this safety checklist.
Okay, very good. You didn't have those memorized, did you?
I have been asked that question quite a bit.
Okay, well, okay, very good. I'm impressed. I'm
Like the
impressed.
Pepto-Bismol commercial.
Yeah, oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, next question. Thank you. What's the responsibility of church staff members and volunteers, i.e. or e.g. children's ministry? What happened to it? Okay, okay. Children's ministry, ushers, with regards to the wearing of face masks. So what's the responsibility of church staff members and volunteers with regards to wearing a face mask? Let's see, let's give this one to Matt. How about that, Matt?
Yeah, sure. In the mask requirements, it does address staff who interact with the public on behalf of a church as having a mask requirement. It continues to be an individual requirement more than one that is placed on the church itself, but staff are identified within that, as if you interact with the public, then you're expected to wear a mask, particularly in the indoor spaces. There was some mention about children's ministry leaders. For regular Sunday services, there's still not a provision for Sunday school or children's activities to take place, at least here in California. So that continues to be a real restriction.
Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Matt. Good job. Our next question I guess we have here is, was that it? We're pretty much, okay, gotcha. We have a couple of questions sort of unrelated, and if you wanted to ask those questions in the future, feel free to contact us and we'll give you some feedback. But I do want to respect your time, and we want to keep it at an hour. So there's one more question. Okay, we'll go and do this one. How about the waiver required by church insurance companies to be signed by those attending? Assumption of risk, question mark? Interesting. Okay, I'll open that up to the staff. Would someone like to jump in on that one? Feel free to do so. I said, once again, it's how about the waiver required by church insurance companies to be signed by those attending church services as an assumption of risk?
This is Kevin. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
One thing, with your insurance company, remember that you are bound by a contract. It's your insurance policy. Look at the policy. Is the insurance company trying to insert a term in that policy that you did not bargain for? Each policy will be different, but I believe that this will be something that is outside of what you both agreed on doing, and therefore you would not be obliged under the law to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Good point. Good point. All right. So very good, folks. I think this was very constructive. Once again, next week, please notify private Christian schools you're aware of, that private schools of faith that would like to receive our expertise, the research we've been putting into this for weeks now on helping to equip private religious schools to open up safely and legally and reasonably. We've seen some crazy things that private schools have been thinking they're going to mandate, and they think they're doing the right thing. In reality, they could be really setting up a trap for liability that they're not aware of. So that's really valuable. Also, church homeschooling co-ops, great opportunity for churches and for parents to work together. This is a no-brainer, and I see this as a great, incredible opportunity that has come our way. Over 40% of all parents are planning on or leaning towards homeschooling next year. That's huge. So I encourage you to be on the call for that next week, and we're going to be addressing that and other issues that are involved with the education issues, as well as the shutting down potentially of charter schools and what may be available for churches and parents dealing with that as well. So that's going to be next week. And of course, if we have any updates specifically regarding the COVID, any kind of updates that you need to be aware of, cases or otherwise, for example, the cases we're waiting for the Supreme Court to come down, we're going to give you updates on those, of course, as well. but we want to make sure that the private schools are definitely addressed next week. So thank you very much for participating. And if we can ever serve you in any way at Pacific Justice Institute, give us a call. And remember, keep the faith.